Hi, welcome to Zada. I hope you're having a fantastic day. We have three topics for you today. We're going to talk about Kashmir conflict, India and Pakistan's conflict. We're also going to talk about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, two Muslim women in U.S. Congress under fire. Our last topic is going to be about Iranian human rights lawyer Nasrin Sotoudeh, who is imprisoned in Iran. But let's get to the first topic, Kashmir, with our guest, Tarek Fatah, who is author and also writes for the Toronto Sun. Tarek Fatah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get to our first topic, Kashmir. Before we get into who to blame, obviously, like any other conflict around the globe, it's becoming black and white. It's either Pakistani's fault or Indian fault. Let's talk about some facts. Tell us some facts. The conflict has been going on since 1947, and then you have a majority of Kashmirians. They are Muslims, 60%, and it's under Indian rule. Tell us more about Kashmir that in terms of fact.
Well, you have to understand that at the time of partition, when Britain divided British India between India and Pakistan, there were at least about 200 to 300 princely states that were governed not under Britain but under the protection of the British Empire. And Jammu and Kashmir state, along with Bhopal, Hyderabad, Junagadh, there were countless. The state of Bahawalpur. There were hundreds of these tiny kingdoms, statehoods that had to choose, the ruler had to choose between one state or the other. Among them, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the ruler had come to an agreement that there will be a standstill agreement. He will make a decision at a later stage whether he chooses to join the Republic of India or the Republic of Pakistan. In the meantime, the Pakistan military infiltrated and invaded the state of Jammu and Kashmir by military personnel in civilian clothes and a large number of Pashtun tribesmen who today would be categorized as the Taliban. Perhaps today's Taliban are the great grandsons of these people. They invaded the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and the ruler at that time, under threat of the Pakistani invasion, opted to join the Republic of India. And that allowed India to send in their troops, and part of the territory was occupied by Pakistan, while the rest of it, which is the main Kashmir Valley and areas of Jammu and north east in Ladakh, which border China and Tibet, became what is called Indian administered Kashmir. The matter was taken by India to the United Nations, who passed a resolution, the Security Council, saying that the people of Kashmir will decide ultimately which side they have to go. But with one caveat, which was that every person who entered the state of Jammu and Kashmir after August 1947 has to leave. Every Pakistani soldier, every tribesman has to vacate the territories before a referendum can be held, and Indian troops were allowed to stay in Srinagar to administer this. Now, what has happened since then is that instead of Pakistani troops and civilians vacating the area, they have populated most of that area with Pakistanis from other parts and given a large segment of that territory to China as a gift. And today, in what is now called Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, or the Pakistanis call it Azad Kashmir, which means free Kashmir, there are at least 100,000 Chinese troops. Now, if we were to have a plebiscite, a referendum, which India says is not applicable anymore because Pakistan and India had an agreement in 1972 or 73 called the Shimla Agreement, under which it is said that this matter will be solved bilaterally. Even if that were true and International Security Council resolution has to be adopted, China would have to withdraw 100,000 troops from there.
Wow.
Pakistan would have to take out at least 1 million people, including every soldier that is stationed over there, and take them out. That is never going to happen, which means that
the referendum will not happen then.
It's not going to happen because Pakistan is not playing the game with any degree of honesty. Pakistan, in fact, has a bigger claim on Bangladesh than it has on Jammu and Kashmir, because Bangladesh was a part of Pakistan till 1971 and seceded. But Pakistan has never said, oh, we want our territory back. So when they talk about Kashmir, their objective is to bleed India by supporting terrorist groups who arouse the passions of the Kashmiri people, saying that you are under Hindu rulers and we as Muslims should be together. In fact, the track record of Pakistan is that no segment of the Muslim community has been safe. The Shia Muslims, especially about 25% of the population, are under dire threat. The Ahmadi Muslims, who are about not even 10%, have been declared as non-Muslims. And in Balochistan, there is a genocide taking place. In the Pashtun areas, there are widespread protests against Pakistan military rule. So Kashmir, the issue of Kashmir is just a sideshow that the Pakistan military puts on so that they can grab billions, hundreds of billions of dollars for themselves to say, oh, if we were not there, the Indians will take over.
So when I'm hearing that the referendum, which might not happen anytime soon because of the situation, and also, why do you think there's not a lot of talks or attention on China's troops in that region? Because a lot of times you don't hear that from the mainstream or on Twitter, social media.
I have been to those areas. I am perhaps probably the first journalist to cross into China from Pakistan, Kashmir. The area, by the way, the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is called Baltistan, which has no links whatsoever to the rest of Pakistan. The language is closer to Tibetan or Bhutanese rather than any Pakistani language. Baltistan was an independent state which was occupied after the British officer in charge, Captain Brown, handed over the keys to a Pakistani lieutenant and said, this is yours. So the dishonesty, there's dishonesty on one side and very bad judgment level on the other. India has played its hands pretty poorly by not being able to call Pakistan's bluff. India should have said, okay, let's have a referendum. What would Pakistan do? Ask the Chinese to leave? It's impossible that the Chinese would leave. They've invested about $46 billion in Pakistan, and their only connection to Pakistan is through that route. You think the Chinese will say, oh God, we're sorry, we got 100,000 soldiers over here? They've even got Chinese prisons built in Pakistan to serve as indentured workers, because the Chinese prisoners for criminal.
Well, what I don't understand, if Kashmir is independent, why China cannot stay there? Like, why they cannot have an agreement? They can still do business with Pakistan and with the rest of, because China doing business with many countries. I'm sure India is one of them too.
Yeah, well, the point is that for the referendum to happen, China has to withdraw.
Let's go back to what I'm hearing, that we cannot, or India or Pakistan or UN cannot ask China to withdraw their troops. And also, we haven't answered the question of why nobody talking about China's existence or presence in the region.
Primarily, the world of journalism is dominated by the English language press, and we are all conditioned to accept what is in the New York Times and say the
Washington
Washington
Post.
Post
Yeah.
as the truth, and if it is from Kehan International or Times of India or the Karachi Dawn, uh, we ourselves, people of color, will find more credibility in the Western press, perhaps because they have a track record of journalism. Having said that, journalists in the Western world pay very little attention, even in their subconscious, about what happens in places where people are not white, Anglo-Saxon, European, or Slavic in nature. As an example, I'd say if tomorrow 10 people died in Paris, it would be front page news across the world. If tomorrow 1,100 people died in Karachi, you think even it would be on page 15? No. So the value of my life and that of someone in Paris is weighed in that context. I look like an Uber driver. The guy in Paris looks like a chef or someone with a fine taste in cuisine or has gone to the opera, and I basically run a cab.
Yeah.
So we are fixated in how we view the world. Similarly,
So they're like, what are you saying? If you are in European, Western countries, your life is valued more. The same thing happened when a lot of Western journalists spoke out when Iraq war happened. There was like a death of which absolutely any death should be reported, and it's the same sadness. But there was like 20 kids would die in Iraq, and then and people didn't know how to explain it, so they wouldn't be criticized as if like, oh, you think the life of our troops not valued. You didn't know how to explain it without being, oh, are you saying
we are politically correct as well on all sides. For example, the current threat around the world, by any measure, is Islamic terrorism, but we can't say that. We will say, well, terrorism is bad, all religions have extremists. But I've never met a Hindu who wants to conquer New York City. I've never met a Buddhist who wants to take over Moscow. But I can tell you hundreds of my Pakistani acquaintances who live and die on the notion that one day the whole world will be Muslim. So I'm just saying that we can't even utter those words. We call that what CVE, violent extremism, we call it. We dare not say that this is Islamic extremism. We say violent extremism. Now, how many Buddhists do you know are outside Myanmar who have carried out the slaughters that Afghanistan or in Iran or in Pakistan or even some of the Arab countries in North Africa have gone through? How many genocides can you demand? Darfur, 500,000 Muslims killed who were black, killed by Arab Muslims. 1971, 3 million dark-skinned Muslims killed by 90,000 Pakistani fair-skinned troops, all Muslims. But we can't nowadays utter those words because we are constrained by, I would even say, some element of white guilt on the left of the political range. No, we can't say that. We can't say that. Look at that. Iran has no nuclear bombs, but Iran faces criticism. Pakistan has 200 nuclear bombs. Nobody wants to talk about.
But they're both Muslim countries. Why is that then? So the previous argument or the arguments we just mentioned doesn't make sense because
it does make sense.
Because Iran is a Muslim country, but they criticize even doing anything. They're like, oh, Iran did this. We have to invade them. And then you have Pakistan, you just said. So what's going on here?
Over here, what's going on is that the West recognizes the Arab and the Iranian part of the Middle East as people who they can associate with in equivalence. As soon as you go east of the Himalayas, either people are darker skinned or they are East Asian. So they fall off the edge. Iran is the easternmost place where people can identify with fair-skinned people. In fact, in the United States, every Arab immigrant enlists himself or herself in the census as white.
Yes, I was in shock when I moved.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
now,
from Iraq. When I moved, they're like, "Oh, you white," and I'm like, "I'm not." What?
They
I
were not
never.
white Arab,
Yes.
but they will insist that they are white. The Arabs insisted in South Africa that they were white. So once you do that in the Iraq or Iran, there is a sense of a commonality that the West can recognize. But when you're dealing with, say, Narendra Modi, in which 900 people, million people will go to work in on April 19th, I think. 900 million people. Nobody's paying attention to it. Why? They all look like, excuse me, I repeat the term, as cab drivers or Uber drivers, they wear strange clothes. Their food is very tough to, it's very hot and, oh, okay. So we've become a sideshow. And therefore, Iran becomes the target and Pakistan escapes attention. Anyone I've asked among the Israelis, why don't you talk about Pakistan? They have no clue where it is. I've never met a thesis paper that discusses Pakistan's nuclear program. It's got 200 nuclear bombs, mostly aimed at India, and quite a few aimed at Israel. And you go to Israel, nobody will talk about it. Why? Because we don't look like nuclear bombers. We look like Uber drivers. Sorry.
Okay, so I agree and disagree what you just said, but I agree in terms of like when you say, okay.
Sorry, to answer your question.
Okay.
This is why no one in the West understands Kashmir. If Kashmir was, say, in Greece, everybody would know about it.
Yeah.
The only reason they know about Myanmar is because this way they can manipulate the whole scheme and work and to say to everyone, look, we are standing up for Muslims. But when 10 million Muslims are in Chinese jails, nobody talks about it.
Yes, that's another topic I was thinking for us to talk.
10 million in jail for being just Muslim, and nobody talks about that. So there's something screwed up somewhere. I might not know why. I can only guess.
Yeah, why do you think? Because we're thinking to do a show on Chinese Muslims and the way they've been treated, which the mainstream media absolutely ignores. There's some journalists I found on Twitter and social media, they actually report, but then nobody paying attention to them. What's going on there?
Nobody knows how to fit these Uyghur Muslims into which category. They are from a territory called Eastern Turkmenistan. This is Chinese occupied territory. Eastern Turkmenistan had no Chinese presence. If you read about Tamur Lane, he talks about these things in his own book. I'm talking hundreds of years ago. But China's occupation of Tibet allowed it to occupy East Turkmenistan as well, which they now call Xinjiang, which basically means the frontier. Mm-hmm. I've been to Kashmir, I've been to Xinjiang, and there is absolutely no connection with Uyghur Muslims and Islamic extremism. But they've put 10 million people in jail, and the hypocrisy of these Arab countries and Iran and everyone else is nobody wants to even ask China, what are you doing?
No,
in fact,
including Saudi Arabia, you have those countries, they should be the defenders of Muslims.
They defended the Chinese. The Crown Prince, MBS, said China is doing the right thing.
So it takes us back, then we'll move to our next topic, Ilhan Omar. But it takes us back, so it's not about being Muslims. There's some kind of other powers going on, influence, which topics or countries or religions at the moment will have more attention, and it's not because Islam is not because Iran is Muslim country. They have bad attention and they have all these sanctions on them, and then you have Muslims in China they treat it this way, but nobody's saying anything. And then you have Pakistan, according to you, that it's not given enough, the right attention to see what's going on, why they did what they did in Kashmir, and that's why, assuming that's why there's the percentage of Muslims in that region increased 60% because of the Pakistani moved the troops, the Pakistani moved people.
Let me give you a slightly historical background. Kashmir was always 100% Hindu kingdom. In the 8th century, when the first Arabs invaded India, Kashmir had a kingdom for 100 years that went from the Caspian Sea to Bangladesh. And it was 100% Hindu state. It has been, the Hindus of that area were slowly decimated. In fact, the last Hindus to be expelled from that are the Kashmiri Brahmins, the pundits of Kashmir, who were driven out in 1990. I think 500,000 of them were expelled and asked to leave by the Muslim residents of those. So our hands are not clean. We have committed horrors right from the murder of the Prophet's family in Karbala to Bengal and Kashmir, and look what's happening in Afghanistan. So there are many places where instead of Muslims doing reflection and trying to see what can I do to better myself, they come up with people like Ilhan, Representative Ilhan, who comes out with absolute contempt for America and is sitting in the House of Representatives. See, this is, you're talking about Miss Rashida Tlaib.
Mm-hmm.
It's on videotape, she's saying the Muslims are here. We have come to the Congress.
Well, it's part of diversity, though. Don't you agree?
Well,
don't you want to see every color and faces and represent people from their communities?
Hold on. Muslims have been in the House of Representatives for the last 20 years.
Not Muslim women, though.
Yes, forget about that. She didn't say Muslim women are coming. She talked about Muslims, except those Muslims were black. And somehow we don't like black Muslims. We want our Muslims to be dainty and fair-skinned, fashionable. You made hijab to come in the generosity of the House of Representatives.
Ilhan Omar is black, though. She's from Somalia.
Ask her if she's black. Ask the Somali population if they associate with the black community. I work with them here.
So do you think Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, they're racist?
Oh, they are anti-West. That much I know.
You think
they're absolutely they are pro-Sharia law. They have never uttered a word of the hundreds of Iranian women who have suffered because of the hijab. And then you take that hijab, which has caused so much pain around the world, and introduce it into the House of Representatives on the same weeks and days when Iranian women were being beaten up and being sent to jail for protesting the hijab.
So I have to say something, because I personally think, why not? Ilhan Omar seems she hasn't served a lot, right? It's been only about 2 months. I think it's great she's elected, and I'm really, really happy for her. Let me finish. And then I think Rashida Tlaib, the same. It's really nice to see somebody from her background to serve. However, like you said, I'm still waiting for them to speak for other human rights defenders, like in Saudi Arabia or Iran. I want them to actually defend those people. So I hope, I'm wrong. I hope I'm going to see that.
They won't even defend the Muslim women who stood up against the mullahs in America. You know the woman, her name slips, who led the Women's March. She's the Muslim Brotherhood, Linda Sarsour.
Well, I don't know. She's...
That hijab, which is the flag...
Linda Sarsour. Linda Sarsour. Yes.
Linda Sarsour came in the corridors of the Congress and is recorded on a microphone in Arabic, telling someone that what's her name, Asra Numani, who was filming her. She says in Arabic, make sure she doesn't get in. And what was CARE doing over there? Blocking the door. There was another man over there, belongs to CARE, who was taunting Asra Numani and saying, you are not welcome over here. These are the first indicators. When you get elected and you raise the Palestinian flag and not the American flag, when you talk of Allahu Akbar, and when you say that we have arrived, that means the previous black Muslims who had arrived were not there. No wonder you don't live in neighborhoods where there are black Muslims. Show me some Arab Muslims who live in black neighborhoods. Show me a Pakistani or a Somali who lives in an African neighborhood. No, they won't. I'll show you some of my friends who, despite being fairly wealthy, have lived in quarters which are underserviced in Washington, D.C. A friend of mine was just murdered in that neighborhood by a neighbor. He was a professor. He chose to live there because he chose to work with people who are suffering, not to elevate himself to a level, I am now the fashionable, I have become American. There are Americans who suffer and who endeavor, and you associate yourself with the wealthy, that's your choice. But then you enter the Democratic Party, you condemn Israel, you are openly anti-Jew, and you say that the resolution against anti-Semitism should be changed and made into anti-Islamophobia.
Well, Islamophobia exists too. You have to know.
Yes.
Some Muslim. If you cover, and I have some friends.
Okay, I want to know what.
I think the resolution was completely unfair because I forgot the name of this Republican who was saying something similar.
It was a Democratic Party. It was a Democratic who stood up to condemn the anti-Jewish.
I know, but they did not stand up the same way, condemned another colleague. I think it was a Republican said something, and the mainstream media and also everybody else on social media, they didn't report on him. I cannot think of the name of the guy.
Just a second. You think the election of two radical Muslim Sharia-loving women to the American House of Representatives is an indication of Islamophobia?
Oh no, I don't think that's.
How did they get elected?
Oh, I don't think, but I think the reality, the facts, Islamophobia exists too. Muslim communities, because
no,
not every.
No, it doesn't.
Well, yes, it does.
Or if the first page of the Quran says to curse the Jews and the Christians, and repeat that 17 times a day in every mosque of America, is that Islamophobia or is it Jew hatred?
Well, also we see a lot of incidents, people who are committing crimes against what appear to be, if you appear to be Muslim, because I know people who cover, and I've witnessed with them, not against me because I don't cover, I'm not the obvious Muslim that people can attack me, but they do get discriminated against. They do get.
And here's the point, sister. If you're saying that women who don't cover are sluts, isn't that what the mainstream Islamic Sharia notion is, that Western women are sluts? Are you saying that this is not the general conversation in America? That people tell their daughters, don't behave like that? Don't take something off your head?
Well, it is, but then there's a lot of Muslims like me too. There's my parents, and there's, I know, like big community, and I understand it's really complicated. That's when it becomes so complicated.
Not complicated.
Because I know my parents, they're like devoted Muslims,
yes,
but then they raised us liberal comparatively to, and then it's not just me. I'm not unicorn. There's like many other Muslims, and they identify. And I know what kind of Muslims, like if somebody obviously supporting Sharia laws and somebody completely.
Where else does this come from? This headdress and the niqab, where does it come from? Sharia.
From Sharia, of course, yes.
Yeah, well, it didn't even, there's nothing in the Quran that says that. Who decided this? Why don't men have to do that? why do men have to wear white and women black in the desert? Have you thought about it?
Somebody was just telling me that the other day. They're like, well, the argument about that, why women, it's so, we're talking about, clothes, and they said, why women in that hot weather have to wear black? I mean,
because they're told to wear black. Because white is for men. It's the ultimate patriarchy that is coming down, and decent people in America and Canada and Europe are blind to it. There are men who say, I will wear white because white deflects heat. You, my wife, will wear black because black absorbs heat. Can you be more unfair than that?
Yes, but what I'm saying is, again, it just when we talk about Muslims and people identify as Muslim, they're so diverse, and depends which country they're from.
Not diverse.
They're diverse.
Diverse in their language. They're diverse in their cuisine. They're diverse in their clothing, and they're diverse in their culture. This thing is made by the Muslim Brotherhood, enacted by Saudi Arabia, and then enforced by the Arab rulers of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Did you know that unless you wear a black hat, you cannot be the supreme leader of Iran? And you have to be an Arab? In Iran, you have to be an Arab to be the head of supreme leader of Iran. How racist can you be? I respect many of the Ayatollahs. I think they're very learned people. I respect Iranians because they are the most read Muslims in the world. Trust me. There are more books translated over there. I am a Sunni, but the Shia Imams are better educated. I respect them for that. But once you have a law that says only Arabs can be heads of states in a country where 90% of the people are non-Arab.
So what kind of, you're Muslim Sunnis?
Sunni, yes.
So how do you explain when you say I'm Muslim, but then Sharia is like that and Islam is like that?
Sharia was written by who? The enemy.
I understand. It's a very simple question. I'm just saying, when you explain to yourself, oh, are you Muslim? You're going to say yes. And then how do you explain, what kind of Muslim are you?
Let me explain it to you. Very simple. One line.
Okay.
Allah's Islam versus Mullah's Islam. Very simple. All of Sharia was written by the enemies of Prophet Muhammad. 100 years after he died. The Banu Umayyah.
So what are you saying, you can be Muslim and anti-Sharia then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Islam is fundamentally believing that one human will not submit himself or herself to any other human being. There is one creator and there is one truth. And it's obligatory on the Muslim to speak the truth, even if that truth hurts you. This is the essence of Islam.
So, and you also, in your previous conversation comments, you mentioned Quran talks about Jewish. How do you explain that for you as a Muslim, and you believe in Islam?
No, one second. Yes,
it's tricky, see?
Absolutely. No. The Quran says on the opening page, Muslim says to God, show me the right path, not the path of those you led astray, nor the path on whom, God, you have thrown your wrath. Okay. It doesn't mention anyone. Then you come to that place and ask the mullah, what does this mean? That's when Sharia comes in, and Sharia says the first person is the Christian and the second person is the Jew. My challenge to the Imams is, will you stand there and say that you don't know what this means and that it is not the Jew and the Christian? Say it aloud. But every mosque in America is repeating this 17 times a day. And every time a Muslim asks a scholar or read the book, I've got about 18 interpretations of the Quran behind me. Everywhere it says it's the Jew and the Christian. So we need to be honest. We are fairly dishonest bunch of people who think we can trick ourselves through every way by duplicity. No. If the Quran doesn't say it's the Jew or the Christian, then it's not the Jew or the Christian. If the mullah says it's the Jew and the Christian, then let's take that mullah out and say, you are charged for hate, spreading hate in the United States of America. Let Ilhan do it, and I will come down and say.
Well, anywhere else in Middle East too, there's so much hate there too. We're gonna go to our last segment because we don't have time.
Sure.
Iranian human rights lawyer Nasrin Sotoudeh, I know you follow her story. Sentenced 38 years in prison and also 148 lashes. And we both really saddened about this news because it seems like it's hard to defend rights these days, and especially in those countries, because like we said at the beginning of the show, people want to take sides. It's either black or white. You hate Iran or you defend human rights. It's like so confusing about that.
I disagree a lot with the Iranian regime, but I am absolutely in admiration for the courage of the Iranian people. They've suffered a lot. Not just under Ayatollah Khomeini, under the Shah.
Yes.
The suffering under the Shah has been forgotten.
Even that, people has to take sides. You either love Shah or love this revolution after
I know,
Shah. It's like you can't, because Shah was doing a lot of crimes too that people don't know about.
I'm 70 years old. I know how many of my friends died in Iran. How many people with the Tudeh party were slaughtered. How many from the Aqliyat, the Mujahideen, how many people died under the Shah? Forget about Khomeini, I'm not exonerating anyone. My point is, when you are so insecure that you send mothers and wives and sisters to 38 years in jail, it shows just one thing, that you are a very weak, senseless, idiotic mullah. I would not have within me the ability to tell someone you're going to jail for 38 years. I would need to commit suicide if I did something like that and take my own life. And then to whip her? Yeah. You say, and where do they come up with this formula that says...
yes, when I was surprised, I'm like 148. I know this is really sad news, and you know, our thoughts with her and her families, obviously. It's so unfair to her, but then where do they come up with like 148 lashes or 38? Okay. What do you think? What kind of system is that?
This is where I come to Allah's Islam and Mullah's Islam. The Mullah's job is to make Islam so complicated that you even have developed formulas of how to punish. That you cut your hand at the wrist and 1 centimeter above the wrist, and if you cut the left wrist, then you have to cut off the right elbow, right knee, or the below the, it is so bizarre. There are so many ways that they have come up over the last 1,000 years of us to do very simple things in life. How to cook, how to enter the kitchen, how to leave the kitchen, how to, it's just bizarre. If you read the books that I have read on Sharia, you would pull your hair out and say, where do these people get the time? Put them to work in a factory, 9 to 5 job, and they'll all be okay. But they're sitting in a mosque, and they are the only people who between morning and afternoon have nothing to do except sleep. So they get up, call everyone to prayer by loudspeakers, which were considered, when loudspeakers came, they said it is haram. Now imagine, there is no need for loudspeakers to wake up entire city neighborhoods. They do that. And then they go to sleep. Then they get up at noon, Zohar, they again call to prayer, and then they go to sleep. The mullahs should be asked, you cannot be mullah unless you work in between this time at a factory or a sawmill or be a plumber or do something like that. They have time on their hand, the government gives them money, and then they sit down with big beards. And if you notice, sometimes mustacheless beards. That's a new sign of the mullah coming up, which tells you immediately, this guy is a Salafi. He is there as danger. And young Muslims born in America are copying mullahs from India, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. We need to simply be honest. Nothing else. America has gone through its fight against racism and slavery. The worst affected people on earth were redeemed under the anti-slavery, under civil rights. We need to learn from those who fought against racism. Instead, we are bringing the same racism and hatred to the United States.
What?
If
Go
sorry,
ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
if then some ultra right-wing nutbar comes up and causes pain, don't you think it is our responsibility at somehow to calm the nerves of the Americans to say, no, 9/11 happened. Before anybody hits you, we'll take the bullet. Can't we say that?
Well, I think this can be said, and also I think America or even Canada, North America, doing a great job. Like, I think promoting diversity is really important. But then also what I have noticed the last 5 years, they ignore those people who defend human rights, for example, in Saudi Arabia or Iran. I'm not saying those countries completely horrible. I think they can improve. I think you don't have to completely, defend them, even though when they're right. You can say, hey, you are doing okay, but then you really need to improve certain things, or this is not acceptable, because we're doing business with them, seems like more and more.
Let me give you an example. We had an agreement signed between the European Union, Russia, China, the United States with Iran. Everybody agreed that everyone was keeping to the terms of the agreement. And then President Trump canceled it and said that the deal is off. Now, once we start on our side breaking treaties and trying to bully other countries, what is happening in Venezuela today? Tell me, isn't it what we did in Chile? Somebody's blowing up the power generators over there and creating chaos. Are we children that we don't understand what's going on? They're bringing the Monroe Doctrine that allows America to interfere anywhere in South America with military, with power, and we are sitting there thinking this is a big crisis. This cannot happen. But we can't speak unless until we first establish that the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of joy is as much part of our belief as of any other American. Some of us believe that the pursuit of joy is actually a sin. Ask a mullah, is pursuit of joy halal? And he will say, La hawla wala. This is completely not right.
Okay.
You need to be.
We also, this is another talk or debate that if we think we have to defend every country and then we think we can go fix their lives, that might be another issue too. But we might be able to talk about that next time. Tarek Fatah, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for watching. If you liked this interview, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow us on social media at naskahzada.com.